SMS line, and the hashtag is NewsNight. Parliament set to resume on the 14th of February. After that long recess, the economy and political contests are set to dominate proceedings. I'm here with the minders of the House business, Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah. Thanks for staying with us. And Minority Leader Opiyo Wandayi are live with us on the program. Thank you, Honorable Wandayi, for staying with us as well. Just before we went through a couple of news stories, Opiyo Wandayi threw down the gauntlet and asked about the 300 billion, a promise made by the President on the, I think it was on the 29th of September 2022, when he ordered the National Treasury to cut 300 billion Kenya shillings from the budget to relieve Kenya's spending and borrowing pressures. And that's where I want to begin with you, Honorable Ichung'wah. What measures did you take as Parliament, as the side of the majority, as owners of the budget, to implement that proposal by the President?
Well, Wahiga, I just told you before we took the break that the supplementary budget estimates have just landed in Parliament. And actually, the Parliamentary Budget Office is doing the analysis now. And by tomorrow, I'm told, they will be done with the analysis and onward transmission to the committees to be able to consider. And I'll tell you, the commitment by the President to cut the budget by 300 billion shillings was just no talk. It's something that is intended to be done. If the National Treasury has not done it, Parliament will do it. But I'll tell you, a brief engagement with the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, and I've just seen the press release that they did today.
3 days ago or so.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, this is on Friday.
Yeah.
Actually, and this is the same day they actually submitted the estimates to Parliament. If you look at that press statement, you see the things he spoke to, the 6 silent issues that he spoke to in this press. Actually 4. And I'll draw your attention to number 2, the carryovers of additional expenditure that were affected outside budgeted items. If Wahiga, we were to implement this budget as was passed in the House last year, the budget deficit then was at 6.2% of GDP. Had we carried on with what the previous regime did, in the last 3 weeks before the elections of August 8th last year, they committed over 200 billion shillings outside of the budget in very opaque things. And I'll tell you one of the things that we intend to do as Parliament, if the National Treasury has not embarked on it, because I remember during vetting, and Opiyo Wandayi was there when the CS committed to ensuring that there is an audit of this over 200, I think it was about 227 or 28 billion shillings that was paid out of the budget. A lot of this money went to very interesting things. You remember the maize subsidy? A whole 8 billion shillings went to the maize subsidy that was to provide unga at 100 shillings. Unga that Kenyans never saw on their shops or in their homes. They were never able to access that 100 shillings unga. Unga that millers are still demanding for payment from government, but the money had been paid out by Higa.
So off that statement that you've just read for us...
Let me just mention another interesting thing. And then 60 billion shillings that went with the fuel subsidy that the President did end when he took office. And a lot of other money that went into things to do with NMS. And I don't need to tell Kenyans who were the main beneficiaries of the business that was being done by NMS, especially in the cabro business that you have seen in Nairobi around the city. All manner of work was being cabroed. Even walkways were Higa.
Let me take you back.
Let me finish that point.
Walkways, I asked you a question.
We were removing.
I asked you about walkways. Parliament's role in the 300 billion. You've told me the Parliament's budget office is sitting tomorrow. But surely as Majority Leader...
Parliament has a role.
Exactly. As Majority Leader, you must have an idea of where these 300 billion savings will come from.
Exactly.
Give us some thought process behind that.
You just mentioned it, Wahiga. The fact that the 200 billion shillings that I'm telling you, that was going to finance what were otherwise family businesses, to cabro streets and walkways like Aga Khan walk that had no problem,
okay.
And you remove them. Where do you get the money from? Budget cuts. And you just mentioned it, Wahiga. Remember, you just mentioned that 106 billion shillings is being cut off from the development expenditure. And you asked the question of another 2 billion shillings
recurrent.
Off the cuff. I was just telling you, just looking at this statement, the answer lies in here, that there are other emerging issues, like the drought situation where you have to provide relief food to many families that are suffering, the transition of CBC, the junior secondary school kids that need full capitation to be held in school. And therefore, there are certain recurrent issues that have emerged that you have to finance. And therefore, there will be budget cuts, a few in development, a lot more. And I will tell you, things like travel, things like accommodation, things like hospitality have been some of the biggest casualties. And I'm sure the next question you'll ask me is about parliament.
Yeah, I was about to ask. We've seen you in Naivasha,
I'm preempting your question.
In Mombasa.
I'm preempting your question.
Okay, let Opiyo say.
The austerity measures cut across all sectors of the economy.
Opiyo, jump in.
Even parliament included.
You know, Wahiga, first things first. And as they say, the devil is in the details. I've just looked at this statement, which has come to my attention just this evening from the National Treasury.
Treasury.go.k is where
National Treasury.
Yeah.
It is basically polemics. The author of this statement is basically hiding behind technical jargons. What we want is simple and clear. Give us a breakdown of what constitutes this Kenya shillings 300 billion cut. And I have looked at the snippets from your own analysis, the media. Unless the person authoring this statement wants us to take budget reallocation from development budget to the current expenditure as cut, I don't seem to lay my fingers on any cut. In fact, your analysis tells us that, in effect, there's only been some 13 or so billion shillings cut. You see, so in essence, this statement is evasive. It's not telling us anything much about this so-called 300 Kenya shillings billion cut. But that aside, because that's really their problem. Yeah, nobody forced anyone to commit to that kind of budget cut. It's their business. Look at the second point in this statement. The first point, that financing of all grade 6 learners who have transitioned from 844 to CBC. Wow, Wahiga, as we speak, there is total chaos in our schools all over the country, where learners who were in grade 6 and are transitioning to grade 7 are being forced to pay monies from their poor parents' pockets, monies which they want to actually can't afford in the first place. So what are they saying about this contribution towards this transition? It's not there. It's just a loose statement. But more importantly, because I will have occasion to interrogate this more deeply next week. More importantly, Wahiga, you look at what has come out, that they are adding more monies to the so-called Hustler Fund in this first supplementary budget.
About 12 billion.
For the financial year 2022-2023. A fund which you know clearly well has now been declared virtually illegal by the court. Because the court has ruled that the board that was supposed to superintend over that fund was illegal, the way it was constituted. But more importantly, I would want to see, when I get time to look at this budget estimates, how they are treating the monies they plumped into this so-called fund. I know they'll be, of course, talking about Article 223 of the Constitution. And my friend Kimani here knows very well that article cannot apply in this particular case. So we are looking at staring at a situation where public funds have been expended in an unconstitutional and illegal manner. I want to see how the National Treasury is treating this in this supplementary budget. And therefore, but as I conclude, you know, the cost of living in this country has skyrocketed in the last couple of months or so. So I would want to see the interventions, practical interventions in this supplementary budget on how to address the issues of rising cost of basic commodities, such as food, fuel, electricity, and so on and so forth. I want us to see what interventions in this supplementary budget is going towards addressing the issue of agriculture. Because they talked about reducing the prices of fertilizer from so-called 6,000 shillings to some 3,000 shillings. That was mere talk. Because if you go to the ground, nothing of the sort exists. You can take a random call right now to the common person, peasant farmer in Ugunja. They'll tell you nothing of the sort ever happened. So you want to see what is in this supplementary budget that is going to address that very key area of our economy, which is agriculture. Okay? And therefore, there's a lot more that we need to know. But for now, I will leave it at that because I want to have time.
That'd be part of your project. And just to correct something, you talked about the Hustler Fund being declared.
Yeah, the court has made a pronouncement.
Well, what I see is that the court declined to stop the swearing in of the oversight board members. I don't
For what reasons? Did you go further to see?
So no, because a lobby group and others moved to court.
Yes.
And then the court said, we're not going to stop the swearing in.
And you know, you can't dispense a fund. You can't actually implement a fund without a board in place. You know that.
But the court has allowed the board to continue.
I think Wahiga, Wahiga, what you're fearing to tell Opiyo Wandayi is that he's making up his own case, prosecuting, not becoming the judge. Because there's no such ruling.
I'm referring him to the facts that we have.
He was deliberately misleading Kenyans because there's no such ruling that exists unless he can Google and show us where it is, unless, well, maybe on Google in his mind. But I'll take you back to what he has said about the 300 billion shillings, because it's good that my good friend here and colleague is very honest. And I like his honesty. First, he's not looked at the figures. Just like I said, we are yet to interrogate the figures. Therefore, you cannot even sit here and tell Kenyans that this and this has happened when you have not looked at the figures. But I'll tell you, because I sit in a position where at least I have snippets, not just from media, but also from what I have, my engagements with the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, who I spoke to as late as this morning, Wahiga. The 200 plus billion shillings that was spent out of the 2 to 3. And I agree with the Honorable Opiyo Wandayi. The abuse and misuse of Article 2 to 3 of the Constitution has been persistent and exists. But that doesn't mean that anything that is done under 2 to 3 is unconstitutional and illegal. Because it is a provision in the Constitution and there are guidelines as to what you can do with that Article 2 to 3 of the Constitution in terms of government expenditure. The problem is that if we passed, and if you were keen to what I said at the beginning, we passed a budget last year in June that the budget deficit of 6.2% of GDP, which was the IMF and World Bank target deficit. Today, that budget deficit has been brought down to 5.7% against an agreed target of 5.8 with IMF. So we are still within the agreed figure. And IMF, by the way, and the World Bank were insisting we stick at 6.2. But government being pragmatic and say that we committed to fiscal consolidation as a new government, and intend to signaling that that fiscal consolidation is not just talk. It is something that you intend to do. We said, and the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, and government told IMF that we will push down our budget deficit, not from not the 6.2% that you are comfortable with, to 5.8. So that we are deliberate in the things that we are saying we are not just talking about, we actually act. And the actions of the budget cuts that are there, when we get into the figures, Opiyo Wandayi will be able to see what he's asking, that there have been cuts here and there. And I told you the analysis that is being done by the Budget Office for members of Parliament like myself and Opiyo Wandayi is to tell you that in this particular line item for development, this is what has been cut. In this particular line item of hospitality and
that's
travel,
what I was hoping you'd be able to do that. Yeah.
Myself and Opiyo Wandayi may not be able to travel as much as we would have wanted to travel.
I don't travel.
He will miss a trip that we are going to travel. I could miss one, and so many other people. And I've seen it because even officers, I've seen complaints of officers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a few from the Ministry of Sports on curtailment of travel. Because it is actually something that was implemented.
Are you able to quantify this curtailment? Because from where we sit as Kenyans, for example, just look at the National Assembly, the number of retreats, both within and outside of Nairobi, seem to be at the same pace.
It's not enough because to generalize that if you see Opiyo Wandayi or Kimani Ichung'wah in Naivasha or somewhere.
In Naivasha, in Mombasa for 2 weeks.
Do you know there are times, instances where it is cheaper to do it in Mombasa than in Naivasha? Or cheaper to do it in Mombasa than Nairobi. And I can tell you that
it is cheaper to do it in Naivasha than in Nairobi.
At times. There are instances when I have been a chair of a committee, and I'll tell you that from experience.
I'll need numbers on that.
At times, Wahiga, let me give you a classic example if you allow me. If you were to move a committee of 15 members of parliament from here to Mombasa, you pay a flight and probably negotiate a rate of a return ticket of 10 to 12,000 shillings, plus accommodation. That's all you will pay, accommodation and meals. If you are to move the same group, probably to Naivasha, if they drive, cater for their drivers, cater for their security, cater for their transportation. At times it is more expensive. Since
why can't you just have all those meetings here?
Well,
on the outskirts of Nairobi.
Various reasons, Wahiga. And I believe you, you didn't call me here
no, I did not,
interrogate me on why someone else does what they do.
Well, Kenya Kwanza has spoken about austerity measures. You're the majority leader here today. And all I'm saying is from a perception
do you want us to dwell on it about Parliament? Or because you can invite us on a day and we'll ask the accounting officers of the National Assembly and Senate to be here because they're the accounting officers. Myself and Opiyo Wandayi are not accounting officers in Parliament.
On this
and
one,
they will tell you, they can tell you, because I'm telling you that because I have had that occasion to interrogate the Parliamentary Service Commission on those questions. Why is it not possible at times to get to accommodate members of Parliament within Nairobi, other than have them go to Naivasha or have them go to
Mombasa or whatever. What do they tell you before he weighs in? And
there have been cases where they were able to justify with figures. That I can tell you. But you can't ask me to get the figures here now.
I will
but if you go back to Parliament's Hansard of my time as budget chair, I can tell you there are indeed such instances. Not always, but at times there are such instances. But there are also deliberate moves to curtail even on those seminars. I'll give you an example of the last engagement we had in Mombasa.
Briefly, then
For a week, members of Parliament always are inducted into committees for a whole week. Immediately after, I think they take a break, then they come back for the post-election seminar that is done for every new parliament. A one-off event for every new parliament. Had you done those two events at separate times, as is usually done, you pay tickets to Mombasa and accommodation twice. But Parliament this year, both houses were able to travel almost at the same time, and with one ticket, one airline ticket. You pay one airline ticket, members are accommodated. That's why they ran concurrently over about 10 days, so that you don't have to come back to Nairobi or go back to your constituencies, then pay other tickets, pay hotels again, and therefore you're able to negotiate cheaper hotel rates. Again, remember that with the movement of close to 300 members of Parliament to Mombasa, it also impacts on the economy, Wahiga. After the long December holidays, if you go to Mombasa early January, hotels are usually empty. Therefore, if you're able to negotiate a rate and you keep other Kenyans in employment in Mombasa, from taxi business to hotels, to the people who are employed in those hotels, Wahiga, we cannot just belittle it to be about members of Parliament being in Mombasa or being in that and this and that other place.
Okay.
But now you have dwelled too much on the non-issues.
Unless, and you know, in the House we say order. You say order.
Yeah, you say order, but you also got out of order when you
no, I have to interrogate. It's a
from the debate on the 300 billion, because that is what Kenyans were waiting to hear. Are there actual cuts?
Yes.
And those actual cuts, I told you, they are there. Had we implemented the budget as was left, we were left in a hole. People had a problem with the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, when he said in Kasarani that we have been left in a hole with a bankrupt, almost bankrupt
country.
Empty coffers. Because you had a deficit of about 860 billion. Budgeted for. Then out of the budget, you go out of the budget in the last 3 weeks, Wahiga. If you tell me that is not economic sabotage, Wahiga, and I'm sure if Opiyo's side of the coalition had won this election, they would be in the same problems. You are left in a hole, and that is when the president said then, we cannot continue digging. We are already in a hole. What do you do? Stop digging. How do you stop digging? Make sure these 200 billion shillings, as ambiguous as it is to NMS and all those other funny entities, has already been paid out and money gone. Make sure it is audited, and I'm sure, because Opiyo Wandayi is in charge of the Public Accounts Committee, I hope he'll be so diligent in ensuring that the audit that will come out of the expenditures that were spent in the last 1 month of the last regime, the handshake regime, that everything comes to light.
Okay,
that
you
we
mentioned
know who are the millers who are paid the 8 billion.
I'm going to stop you there.
That Unga never ever got to Kenyans.
Fair point.
You know, the more you listen to these stories, the more you really get amused. Because, you know, people are still lamenting about what kind of coffers they inherited. Where they were empty, where they were half full, where they were half empty, is still in neither here nor there for now. What Kenyans are asking is, what has the regime done since coming to power to address the basic issues that are of utmost concern to the common mwananchi. That is really where the rubber meets the road. Okay? All these lamentations will not solve any problem. We would want to know what is being done to address the rising cost of living. You see, that is the $6 million question, Waiga. And look, the only way you can assess this really is from the budget, supplementary budget estimates, because that is the first budget that they have been able to come up with since coming to power. Okay? And we are saying, even though we haven't had the occasion to look at it in detail, that from the snippets we are getting here, from this media brief from the National Treasury, there's a lot more that meets the eye. Okay? We want to know for sure that the monies that you have been able to collect from Kenyans as taxes through KRA, how have you spent them? Towards addressing the issues that are confronting the Kenyans every day. Okay? That's the most important thing really for me. And therefore, we still insist that we need a breakdown of these so-called cuts.
Is that going to be part of your agenda?
Yes, I will be insisting on that. Okay? What happened previously, the so-called expenditures, the so-called carryovers, the so-called expenditures outside the budgets that could have happened in the previous regime, will be dealt with in a normal manner through audit. Yes, in a normal manner, really. We can't really belabor the point. Okay, if this is true, it happened, somebody will have to account for them. But for now, we want to know what the regime that is in power, that is handling, that is managing taxpayers' money, is doing to address the issues. My concern is that nothing worth talking about is happening. And that is why, really, I'm really looking forward to this engagement next week when we resume our business, yes, on the floor of the House.
And as we talk back
for now, we are rather save taxpayers' money, time, yes, by dealing with more substantive issues.
Let me tell you what taxpayers are worried about.
Yeah.
Debt.
Yeah.
What's the current status of our debt register?
Wahiga, I'll tell you, and I saw some misreporting which the Nation also tried to correct, talking about the Ruto administration has borrowed, I don't know, 500 and what billion over a period of time. You know, outright misreporting and deliberate, I must say so, and I'm sorry to say it on your TV station because your competitors are not using it to harm anybody, and I have nothing against them. But you're also beholden on Kenyans to always relay the truth. Because I told you that what you are to borrow is 860, almost 900 billion shillings. If you were to implement the budget as it were, you would have borrowed 860 plus 200 plus almost 30 billion additional expenditure that I'm challenging my brother here that when it is audited, I hope you will look at it as you ought to. And if you don't look at it, I can assure you, I am a member of parliament, I will make sure it is done. We must get to the bottom of knowing who are these people who got the 8 billion.
Okay.
The 60 billion paid for fuel subsidies, Wahiga, who are the beneficiaries and did benefit the people of Kenya. Therefore, if you had borrowed this plus 860 plus, say, 230, is over 1 trillion shillings would be your level of borrowing. What have we done? What has the government done? And that's the question my brother is asking. First, you stop digging. The 200 billion that had been paid off, nothing to do about it. And that's what the president directed, stop digging. You can't now continue spending as you had planned to spend. There have to be cuts. Opiyo Wandayi is asking for the itemized budget. You don't need to ask it on TV. It is in the estimates, supplementary estimates that are in Parliament that are being analyzed for him by very diligent officers of the Parliamentary Budget Office. You don't even have to do it himself. There are officers already analyzing for him. He will be given a very well laid out document, itemized for him. This is what has been cut. He's asking, what have you done about the cost of living?
Our teams have done a quick analysis of that supplementary estimate.
Why are you not allowing me? Why are you not allowing me to address the issues that are?
I'm worried you're postponing. I am not postponing. I'm answering what we can have clarity on today. For example, we know that
you are the one who brought up the subject, not me. When I tried to answer, when I tried to repeat some of the things that are just being said here for the public to hear, because I thought being in the opposition is easy. And it's the easiest because I have been there, by the way. It's the easiest because you just have to say things that you don't have to be accountable to. But I want to be accountable, my brother to be accountable, because when you say that nothing has been done about the cost of living, this document that you have just, the press statement Opiyo is sharing here, is talking about relief food for people who are suffering, Kenyans who cannot afford a meal. It is talking about the capitation for CBC. And by the way, the one thing I agree with him, there are issues to do with the implementation of the junior secondary with CBC. This morning, Wahiga, I had a very rough time with a teacher in my constituency. A teacher who is trying, someone sent me a photograph of children being forced to sit on the floor in a classroom, in a school that I know have adequate desks. What is a teacher trying to do? Extort money from parents and therefore force your children to sit on the floor so that parents can be forced to pay for desks. I called and I asked my people, my people in the constituency, can you go to the school? I can show you photographs and videos here of desks that are locked up, broken up in a store. That teacher told me, oh, the desk, because I was there, by the way, I make a point of visiting and inspecting almost all my schools, even when they are closed. I went there, I called the teacher, told the teacher, there are so many desks I've seen there, desks that we bought with CDF money from Sepu here in Dagoretti Corner. Some are broken and they are just dumped there. Therefore, when you tell me, and schools are being given maintenance money to repair such desks, you go dump them, then you want to ask parents, then we blame government. And there are things that we must fix, even as ourselves as leaders, and I become proactive myself in my constituency to make sure that we get the right things done.
So, speaking of fixing, because I asked you about debt, the latest report we had in December is that we are close to hitting that 10 trillion ceiling.
By the way, not close, Wahiga. Had we implemented this budget, the Uhuru budget as it were, or the handshake budget, would have burst that debt ceiling by now. We have to be very decisive now as to what you do. He's asking what we are doing now, because, and I hear them even in their rallies accuse us, oh, you keep saying you found empty coffers. You want us to say we found coffers that were full, though are empty. What is it that we are doing about it? We are telling everybody that even those who used their offices to give themselves tax exemptions, tax waivers, tax reliefs. You saw in the Daily Sunday Nation this week of somebody, and I will not mention the name here, but it's somebody who Opiyo knows very closely, whose company has imported duty-free fuel. Apparently
who is that I know?
It is dumped in the country.
They're not here, and we're not here to...
And that's why
we will call them, and that's why we can have that discussion.
I mentioned a name.
And when he says...
No, I'm telling him they're not here.
When he says, I know them, who are they?
He knows them, I know them.
Yeah.
I will tell him off the record.
I don't know them.
Then you get a tax invoice. Now when you sell something, you have a tax invoice, you give yourself a waiver, you are told to pay, and what do? You tell Kenyans, let's go demonstrate. You are telling Kenyans to go demonstrate, Kenyans who are paying taxes. You gave yourself tax waivers. You do not want to pay. Wahiga, some of the things I'll tell Opiyo that we are doing. Those who abused their time in office to give themselves tax waivers, tax exemptions, whether you like it or not, how many times you demonstrate, how many times you have rallies, wherever you want to have rallies, have your rallies, shout all you can shout. But at the end of the day, please pay up your taxes like you and I do and other Kenyans, even those you're asking to demonstrate with you, pay their taxes. And do it quietly, by the way. I had them saying we are making a lot of noise. We are not making noise. And I told them, Wahiga, you remember last week, if you're complaining about noise, being told to pay taxes, please keep your eyes keep your eyes open, ears wide open.
Opiyo, go ahead.
You know now that
we don't have an opposition in our constitution, but the minority leader plays a crucial role in the National Assembly. Talk to us about the role you play in line with what Ishungu has spoken to now.
You know, now that Kimani has raised the issue of tax exemptions, waivers, and what else? Reliefs. You know, well and good. I saw your letter, his letter to the National Treasury asking for this information, which is perfectly in order, really. Because under Article 35 of the Constitution, he has got the right to access information, which is held by the state. Okay? What, of course, is of concern to me, like any other Kenyan perhaps, is why the cut-off date of 2018 is January. We could go as far back as 2013.
I answered that question.
Okay, I don't. Okay, fine. 2002
in my briefing.
Okay,
question.
and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But that aside, I don't hold brief for any person. In fact, I'm not privy to any tax obligations, if any, of those persons money is alluding to. I don't even know them. You know, as a person, I don't even do business. I'm just a simple peasant farmer down there in Ugunja. So I've got no tax arrears that anybody can ask for me. Yes. But the most important, Waiga, it is a duty of every Kenyan to pay taxes. What we don't want is to see tax issues being politicized, overly politicized. Let us leave the KRA to do its role of collecting taxes from Kenyans within the law as established, really. Yeah, that is the most decent thing to do. Yeah, this idea of politicization of tax matters, it doesn't help us at all, okay? The matter of borrowing, you know, we can't run away from it. Because my colleague and friend, the Honorable Kimani, has disputed the figure that was allegedly raised by a media house of 500 billion Kenya shillings having been borrowed between September last year to this year, up to now. If he's disputing those figures,
in fact,
what is the correct figure? You see, you should tell us that
they corrected it.
Fine.
They had mistakenly added it up.
But the point is,
it was already a total
the point to Wahiga is that this regime has continued on a borrowing spree. Okay, that's the most important thing. Against all the pronouncements, all the proclamations that we had during the campaign time. Okay, that this borrowing has gone out of hand. We must bring it to a stop. What has happened is the exact opposite. So you want to know what changed. What changed, really, between the time of the campaigns and now, that borrowing is now continuing unabated. Okay? So that is the most important, critical thing that we need to understand.
What we want to hear from you before he comes in is, as a minority side, where will you partner with the majority side? Are there certain proposals you are ready to work with them on? And are there others that you oppose? For example, we've had the majority side speaking of amending standing orders, having CSS
I'm coming to that.
appear in Parliament, anchoring...
I don't know why you are hurrying.
No, because...
Give me time. I explain that. You know, Parliament works in a very unique way. Yes. Parliament, whether majority or minority, issues we deal with very objectively. If there are issues that are of in the best interest of the country, we always approve. But if there are issues that we think are not important, we oppose, and we do so vehemently. On the proposals of the creation of what? The office of the leader of majority.
There's even the leader of opposition.
The proposal to change the standing orders to allow the cabinet secretaries to answer questions from the floor of the House. Those are issues I spoke to in Mombasa. If you are keen, perhaps you would have listened to me.
For those who missed.
Yes, for those who missed, my position, indeed our coalition position, is that those changes, however desirable they might be, okay, go to the heart of the Constitution, okay, and fall within the purview of Article 255 of the Constitution. And therefore, if we agree as a country that our Constitution is now ripe for a review, which we believe it is, because it's now more than 12 years since it was promulgated, then let's go out there, undertake a holistic review, identify the areas that we want to make changes on, and take those proposed changes to the people in a referendum, and have them take a vote, either to approve or to disapprove. That is our position, and it's very clear, because there is no shortcut, really. Anytime you introduce the position of leader of opposition, okay, wherever he sits, you are basically interfering with the structure of government. Anytime you bring strangers in the name of cabinet secretaries in the House to address, to answer to questions of members of Parliament, okay, you are basically trickling with the issue of the functions of Parliament, and therefore, really, it's a no-brainer. Any first-year law school student will tell you that these are matters that must ordinarily go to a referendum. They may want to, I don't know, let us wait and see. Let's not preempt. But from where we sit, we don't see them seeing the light of the day, those proposals. You know,
I have a break. Do I allow you to respond before the break?
Yeah, well, here maybe I can tell my brother here, you don't need to even be a first lawyer to know that there is absolutely nothing unconstitutional with cabinet secretaries appearing in the House, because they are not appearing on the floor of Parliament as a member of Parliament. And therefore, there's nothing that is tinkering with the independence of Parliament with a member of the executive coming to answer questions. It is just in pursuit of what the president committed to, that he will want to run an accountable and transparent government. I thought something the Honorable Opiyo Wandayi would be very happy to have as leader of minority, because if I was in the minority, I would be very keen to get to square it out with cabinet secretaries on the floor of the House, so that you make sure that they are accountable to the people of Kenya and accountable of all the resources that you are giving them. Opiyo was just complaining earlier about mismanagement of funds at NSSF and other government institutions. This is the opportunity you are being given. Let that cabinet secretary who is in charge, instead of a chair of a committee coming to answer questions to other fellow members of Parliament, let the person who is charged with that responsibility come and be accountable, not to members of Parliament, to the people of Kenya. Because you're not coming there to be accountable to the people of Kenya through their elected representatives. And that's why parliamentary sessions are transmitted live on TV, so that Kenyans are also able to follow the proceedings. And therefore, there's absolutely nothing that needs a referendum, if you ask me, in some of the issues that have been proposed in the memorandum by the president. And even if these things are just proposals, Honorable Opiyo knows that we will be engaging just like we did with the NGCDF debate, so that we have opportunity to engage and Kenyans have some sort of discourse with time. It's not something that we are telling Kenyans, it's not a top priority item, Wahiga. The top priority items today are to first refix this economy, so that we are able to get back our country on an economic trajectory that will ensure that no Kenyan goes hungry, our children are able to go to school, we're able to access medicine in our schools. Those are the priorities. I know, and I heard what my brother Opiyo said in Mombasa. He would be very keen to see a total constitutional overhaul, you know, the sort of the BBI thing being brought back. But I think we are very keen, even before when we opposed BBI, that for us, it's not about creating positions for people. It's about making sure that we create jobs for the majority of Kenyans who have no jobs. Therefore, if you want to look at the creation of a position of leader of opposition as a creation of a position for somebody, we are just trying to perfect the systems where we thought maybe when we did the constitution, they were not very well laid out. And I think this is a matter, if you listen to the president when he was at Chatham House, I think 2 years ago, that he spoke to. So it's not something that he just thought about because he's now president. He spoke about it when he was not president, when he was deputy president, or a beseeched deputy president when his party leader was the de facto deputy president.
I think it's a good point to take a break. Let's take a quick break. We come back, I read your feedback, get some final thoughts. There's a bit of politics also. There's a lot that's happening in regards to that. And we will get it from them. Few minutes and we'll be done. Let's take that short break. We'll be right back.